Hello, everybody. Hope everybody had a good spring break, a chance to relax, and having that last part of the project due before the break, and the next one not due till next week is a uh, nice little gap break in the middle where we can kind of ease up a little, relax. Um, I don't have a whole lot to talk about tonight. I did make some changes to the next upcoming assignment. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But I had a couple things on the list. Yeah, I guess it's mostly about the changes tonight. One thing I wanted to mention, like those AWS accounts, even if you're not going to be using them. So I think group one, you had something else in mind. I couldn't find where I put it in my notes, so that was one of my questions whenever we get to group time tonight. But in group two, along with what you're doing, I kind of set that up as like a playground for y'all. We have credits. You know, there's those big, powerful servers with tons and tons and tons of services on them. And if you run through all the money, I can request more credits for you. And so I kind of just said, one of the things I was just thinking when I set that up is just like a playground. So you can go in there and learn about AWS because there's quite a bit to it. Because for the most part, you're probably used to domain hosting sites where everything's set up and you just set up your account and throw the files on that server. But with AWS, it is just the server. It's just a blank server. You can set that up however you want to. So play around with it and learn it. And yeah, then when you go make your next resume, you can throw AWS, you know, say you're familiar with AWS and up to date on AWS, and that'll look good. Because it is a big thing. The latest numbers just came out, and it's just slightly over 32% of the cloud, basically. So it's pretty much a third of the cloud. Probably an important thing for software developers to know, or at least have some familiarity with it. Know how they label things at the very least. And it'll look good on a resume. So I just wanted to mention that. That's the main reason I opened is we have that money for it available, so we might as well take advantage of it. Let's see. Then that's approval of breakout in groups. So I didn't have a whole lot on the list to talk about tonight. If you all have looked at the next reading assignment, there's a couple chapters there. One of the chapters is called Distributed Systems, and the other one is called Software as a Service. The third chapter doesn't really count to this point. There's 3 chapters, but Distributed Systems and Software as a Service, and both groups decided to do web-based apps for your projects. So those 2 chapters are kind of important for both groups' projects. And basically, that's the changes I made to that design document assignment that's coming up. Since both groups are doing web apps, I added some diagramming stuff from that. A couple other things while it was there. I didn't notice it the first time it showed up, but whoever did the statewide shell called Class Diagrams UML, and just to make sure everybody knows, UML is Unified Modeling Language. That's an entire pictorially based language. So class diagrams are like one word in that language. They're just one, the class diagrams that represent our objects are actually just one piece of the L in UML, not the whole thing. So I did correct that on there. But I added basically procedure diagrams because both groups are doing software as a service sort of things, which means we're going to have servers and databases, clients, and end users. So there's several different parts and ways to map out just a quick diagram showing the flow of information. Basically, I'm in my notes, I put like the one on page 482, that's a simplified example, but do it for the stuff listed on page 486. Which is things like the application, database, presentation layers, like a couple layers there, but the 4 different parts on the list on page 486, pretty much the whole page, but the procedure diagram, that's the ones that roughly look like this. Item 1, item 2, item 3, they look something like that. And then we have just arrows showing communication between different things. So a really easy diagram to draw with time moving that way. Unified modeling language procedural diagram. It doesn't have to be a super complicated one. And I also added workflow, a workflow diagram. There's one in the book right at the beginning of chapter 18, I think. Oh, there it is on page 509. One of those. So as you can see here, it's UML class diagrams. This book doesn't do a very good job representing those. Those boxes are supposed to be the class diagrams, so yours will have all the methods and variables and things listed out. The couple different components or interfaces and the systems. So while that one has a lot in it, everything in the workflow should be in one of the other diagrams, which really makes it a copy and paste thing. So it's like you copy and paste the pieces from all the other diagrams into one spot so that you see how they float, how they fit together. So those were added on there. And I almost deleted use cases. I went ahead and left use cases in there because for both groups, the use cases you had in your requirements document should be sufficient. I don't think there's been any major changes since then. So you ought to be able to take that old use case and just copy and paste it into the new document. You don't have to draw an entire new one. That's the only reason I didn't delete it. Actually, I deleted it once and then hit undo. It was like, well, both groups had use cases in the requirements document that they can just copy and paste that. So it's not really a whole lot of work to hit copy and paste on something you already have. Then the workflow, yeah, like I was saying, everything in the workflow diagram should be in one of the other diagrams as well. So you're going to copy and paste that. Which leads, I guess, kind of leads into this next thing. Well, I mentioned that those diagrams that are going to be in more than one place, copy and paste to put the workflow together, and copy and paste from the requirements document to get the use cases, which seems very redundant. So I wanted to I thought of a little analogy, just kind of slip away from what the book does. Because this book is very, y'all have noticed there's very good information in there, very thorough, but it's all explicitly software engineering. They never escape out of the topic. And personally, I'm a big fan of analogies to help with understanding and think of different ways. So I come up with one for the documentation we've done so far, or up to the next one. And just sort of a different situation of how similar things would relate to hopefully make all this will make sense. Because some of what we're doing here is still classroom specific. I'll put a note here when I get to the plan. But like the first thing we did was a requirements document. So I was trying to think of another example that everybody could probably relate to of how this sort of paperwork stuff fits together on large projects, not just a software thing. Escaping or slipping out of a software for a moment. And what I came up with was like housing or maybe a subdivision. For an analogy, and hopefully everybody's familiar with the typical American housing, all coming in subdivisions, the house, almost identical houses right there next to each other. It's a standard example in software development courses when we're talking about classes and objects, because a class is a blueprint for an object. So a blueprint for a house fits together nicely. Fits nicely with it. So hopefully everybody's familiar with it. But the requirements document, that's like what's going to fall on the architect. So the stuff that the architect needs to, maybe somebody's going to contact an architect and be like, okay, we've got 15 acres that is going to be turned into a subdivision, not too far out of the city. Maybe the average family in this area has 4 kids. The 2 family incomes come out to about 120,000, and all that information about the residents of the area, what the architects need to know. Right? If it's a mountainous area, is that going to block sunshine, or are there going to be great views? What's the weather like in the region, and all the stuff that the architect needs to know. That's where the requirements come in, and that's what the architect considers is what needs to be put together. Which that word even shows up sometimes, right? A systems architect, y'all may have heard of that, or a software architect. Kind of the same thing. That's the one that considers the requirements. That's the person that looks at those requirements and thinks about, does the quick first draft of what's needed to put those requirements into action. Once that's together, then we came back and we did a proposal. Whoops, that's not how to spell proposal. And this is exactly the same thing we did with it. I'm not even going to change this for the analogy. That's just convince people it's worth the investment. Actually taking those requirements and putting them into the rough idea of the action, putting the requirements into action to convince investors that, or convince people in general that it's worth the time and money to be invested into the project. In case of a subdivision, architects can look at all those requirements. Average family, what I say, is going to bring in 100 in a region, is going to bring in 120,000. 4 kids is average for the region. There's mountains and lakes, so there's nice views, big windows with nice views outside them that can up the price of the house, and all that sort of stuff. And convince the investors that it's worth the money and the time to put it together, which is exactly what we do with the proposal. And so our proposal was to convince people that it's worth putting together. Well, after we did the proposal, we came back and actually did the project plan. And this one we did in a classroom format. Right? Everybody on the team contributed to putting that project plan together, at least in theory. By the nature of it, one person kind of stands out in the planning phase, but at least in theory with what we did, the whole team worked together on the plan. But usually that is just a single individual putting the plan together. This is the timeline. And that's really all it is. This is the high-level timeline, the rough idea of the schedule. Who's going to do what? So with the housing subdivision analogy, this is the main contractor. Which may even be the architect themselves. A lot of architecture firms have a main contractor. And if you're not familiar with it, the main contractor would be the one that never touches a hammer. Technically a construction worker, but they might not even own a hammer. The one that does all the planning, the timeline, the scheduling, the finances, all of that stuff. So that's where this falls into this analogy. Hopefully this is making sense. Leading into the design. And the design, what I put here, when I was getting this ready, is this is the blueprint. Whoops. Blueprints actually handed to subcontractors and laborers. So that's the final, after all the architect, the main contractor, all the investors have their say in it, there's the subcontractors, the framing construction workers versus the framing carpenters versus the finished carpenters, right? They don't, they're completely different, and they don't necessarily have to know what each other's doing. The final design, like telling the contractor, okay, put these walls here. Stick a big window on the south side and a small window on the north side of the house. And they don't have to know how it's going to fit into the entire subdivision. Because at the same time, on the other side of the window, they were told to install, somebody else was handed a plan that says, okay, do this landscaping in the yard, this sort of landscaping in the yard. Put one of those long step sidewalks, 10 feet long steps, so that people don't just walk up to the house and suddenly have a really steep climb to get in the house. Those final plans, and everybody has a different blueprint. They only get the blueprint for their job. And that's why so much of this the design gets handled with the Uml diagrams. You have the class diagrams. So you just hand that to one of the developers on the team and say, make these objects. You take a couple of the project manager takes a couple of the other class diagrams, hand them to a different developer. They make these objects. And then a third person gets the workflow diagram, and you tell them, all right, whenever those guys are finished with their stuff, you put them together like this. So everybody has different pieces, the small blueprints, they have the different pieces and don't have to worry about the final picture. So that's what the next one is. So keep that in mind. It's in our case, the entire team group worked together on putting together the project plan, the timeline, the schedule, just because we're in a classroom and everybody needs to see what that's about. Normally one person would do that, and then everybody else just gets their part of it. They get what their assignment is. Basically the main contractor has the entire plan, and then he hands off little assignments to all the subcontractors saying, make this, you make this, and you go make that. And then in the end, the entire project gets put together and looks like it's and works like it's supposed to. So everything's planned out in advance. So it's a lot like that. Hopefully that analogy kind of made sense there. I'm just a big fan of learning by analogies and making comparisons with other things that we're aware of. It helps to build understanding and see how these pieces fit together. Because most of us know about software development because we like doing the coding. We like seeing that part come together. So this is the paperwork class. So seeing all the paperwork might be a little bit different. Sometimes it's hard to see how it fits together. And I thought that might make a useful analogy, thinking about a subdivision. Right? It's too much work for one person. There's lots and lots of people, but it breaks down in kind of the same process we've been going through. Because the step after this is, well, in that analogy, is build the houses, then sell the houses. And the next step after the design for us is to actually build the software. And then after that is user documentation, which hopefully you've been working on along the way. The documentation isn't due till week 8, but a point I always try to express is we know we need the help menu, So keep in mind that the best time to write up that paragraph describing how to use it is as soon as you finish debugging it. As soon as you got it working, it's fresh on your mind. You know exactly what to say to explain to somebody how to make it work. So that is the best time to write that sentence or two. And then after you do that repeatedly, at the end, all you have to do is a little bit of editing to put those sentences together into a nice thing that flows. Or maybe not even editing, just copy and paste them over into a bulleted list in the right order. But keep that in mind when you start developing. The best time to tell somebody how to use it is as soon as you finish debugging it. So along with the design document, I'm going to pull up something on a couple lists here. Oh, they're still in the document. Actually, why don't I send you all this document? I guess I need to save it before I send it to you. SSD links. I'll stop the share. I think I can send this to the chat room. Yep. Attach a file. Y'all see that text file in the chat room? Okay, that's the links I was getting ready to click. Just a couple blogs I found. And for group one, there's the tutorial for Django and AWS, which is nothing. I mean, it's the last line in the AWS tutorial is to create a beanstalk and tell it you're uploading Python code to it. So it's not really an AWS thing. So if you really don't even need that tutorial if you've got Django going on your machines. But let's see this one first. Oh yeah, double click in Notepad. I think it's opening. There it goes. Oh, yep. It did open. It was just running slow. And this just popped in my mind. Does anybody else stay like all up to date on browsers and everything? That new feature in Google is really nice. If you haven't updated Google Chrome, they just did this account management thing because we all have lots of accounts, more than just one. So they did a better separation of your accounts. So you're like your personal, your work, your school, Google accounts. It separates them better and color codes it so you can tell like my other accounts, the Ivy Tech one I set to be kind of greenish. That way, as soon as I look at it, I can tell I'm on the logged in with the Ivy Tech account. But much better separation of accounts. It's a really nice thing if you haven't updated Google. I think it's finally Google Chrome 90. So their version numbers go up quickly, but yeah, it's a nice little addition. So this is from, I'm not sure where iit.edu is. I just found these notes, but it's a nice little breakdown of what goes into here. So an introduction, similar to the requirements document, the same introduction that was there, right? The only difference is you're going to phrase things differently because you're getting ready to put them together, not just starting on the idea. The main one's section 2 here, so the design. So like internal structure, the global structure, well, you can read those words and see how that goes together. And then the architectural and component level. So this is where, like section 3.2 here is where the diagrams would go in. So you put together the Uml diagrams, different classes for the different members of your team, what they're going to make. And they don't have to know what the final version is. They just have to have their particular blueprint. And some of the stuff on this, I saw this one. It was from whatever school IIT is. No, I don't even have a guess. I thought, well, maybe I could think of one real quick. But it seemed like a very detailed breakdown of it, whereas the instructions on the statewide course shell that I used were just somewhat vague. I thought I'd share that with you as sort of a detailed model to look at. The second one here is a blog talking about it. Specifically about a software design document and some of the stuff. There were some good points in that, so I thought I'd share the link with y'all. Then the third one, does anybody ever use Lucidchart? I know in classrooms we usually use Draw.io mostly because it's free. Lucidchart is much better software. A few times lately I've met with one of their sales reps, and there are free accounts. So if you want, you can set up a free account and make much nicer diagrams than you would with Draw.io. But schematic stuff, and they put one here together entirely in their schematic software and have a bunch of things here. When I came across it, it looked like a useful one. So you can kind of see what they did to put it together. But that is some really useful software. A couple steps above Draw.io, so you end up with much nicer stuff. I've been talking with the sales rep lately because it apparently there's a Canvas integration, so I'm able to put that Lucidchart stuff right into the Ivy Learn site. And I did that for the SDEV 253 class on a trial run. I think somebody at the central office has to actually buy it to use it in all the classes. But I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. I'm going to give that a try. Because usually with the schematic things, if there's 10 people in the class, there's a good chance there'll be 10 different formats of a wireframe turned in. There's so many different things. I was like, oh, if I can put an assignment, actual Lucidchart assignment right in Ivy Learn, that sounds super useful. So did that, but they have much nicer stuff than Draw.io. The free accounts have access to a lot of nice things on there. Lucidchart and LucidSpark. Actually, let me pull this up. This is a useful team one. And as we get into the design and actually making the software, is the browser open? Okay, yeah. So there's two of them. There's Lucidchart. Well, and then the same one, they have LucidSpark, which is their online whiteboard. But they are a schematics company. So their online whiteboard, LucidSpark, is a whole lot nicer than the average online whiteboard. A whole lot nicer than like Google Jamboard. Hopefully this isn't going to take too long. And I got an upgrade, but both of these were available on the free account before the sales lady gave me an upgrade last week, so I could do the Canvas thing. But it has like Kanban board templates already there and things to start off with, and for a whole lot of agile development is built into the whiteboard already. So you can just open the templates to have that, and you can get it from the free account. I was hoping it would pull up a little bit quicker than this, but Zoom seems to slow everything down. Oh, they changed the button. On the free account, there was like a Lucidchart and a LucidSpark one. Maybe I can find other templates. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's the Kanban board one. But I guess another way to think about this is a very common one. This is like the professional level of the schematic software. So as you all are getting ready to graduate with your software development degrees, it might not hurt to be familiar with this industrial level version, not the free draw dot out. Oh, that seems to be some sort of business thing, but this is like the template. So a Kanban board template, where you can just drag these things around. I guess this is not the Kanban board one, but hopefully you saw there. It's a little bit better. Roadmaps for projects. Those are some that I had open the other day, but somewhere on the. How do I get to the Lucid Spark one? Is it here?
So those little like notes on there would be like little tasks that people would do. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, I got a little distracted. I was trying to find the one I was looking at. So just like drawing on it, once it's selected, you actually make that a note or put some people's names on it and then drag it around the different tasks. So like a Kanban board, oh, I can stop this and let him in. You'll probably want to talk to him whenever we go to the group thing in a moment. But yeah, all these templates are available on the free one as well. It's Lucid Spark. So whenever I got the upgrade, apparently the paid for version looks a little bit different. But on the free version of Lucid Chart, there was buttons right here. There was a Lucid Chart and a Lucid Spark one. So the Lucid Spark was the thing there. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Lucid Spark board. So
what have we talked about so far besides this Lucid program?
A few things about documents and stuff. The recording will be up later. About the next section of the project mostly.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, actually, I just started talking about this because I wanted to talk for at least a half an hour before going over the projects. And I think it was like 22 minutes or something. I was like, well, I'll talk about this, point you all towards this there's a bunch of diagrams and stuff coming up.
Yeah, I on the other hand was just pretty exhausted, so that's how I was kind of phasing in and out of sleep, and then kind of overslept for a second. That got me being late a bit in class.
Oh, okay, that's no problem. Everything's recorded too, so you can come back and look. But yeah, it's normal Blackboard software, only a whole lot better. And this is industrial level, so it's definitely worth looking into. Y'all can get all these with the free account. I will see if I can add you onto my account somehow because I got the upgrade in order to do the Canvas integrations, but I'm still learning it. I just got the upgrade recently, but a little bit better than Draw.io. And the next section, like I was saying, is a whole lot of documents, a whole lot of diagrams in the document because, like I went through in that analogy, this is the blueprints that you hand to the subcontractors. Building houses, the framing contractors get one set of blueprints and just say, like, here, build this. And the landscapers get a different set of blueprints, like, here, build this. And all of it comes together, and that's what we do with the actual design, right? You have the class diagrams, the procedural flow, the database ERD stuff, and you just hand those to each developer gets that instruction, basically, that blueprint. Like, here, build this class, or here, you put this database together. And then in the end, it all comes together. So all the little pieces. That's what the next thing is. So that was pretty much what I had on the list for tonight, plus some extra because I wanted to make sure I wanted to go till at least 6:30, at least a half hour talking before we broke out in groups. But this is project class, so we can go ahead and split up in groups and get started on this next little section. And if you looked at that before, I did, like I said, I did change those instructions. I wanted to wait till nobody would really see it until I talked about the changes. So I just changed them like 20 minutes ago. But it's should be easy diagrams. The procedural diagrams, those are super easy to draw. And then the workflow. And like I said, everything in the UML workflow diagram should be copied and pasted in from another one of the diagrams. So there won't be very many new things, and if done correctly, there should not be very many new things in that workflow diagram. And then, yeah, the use case, I almost deleted them from the instructions, but both groups, the use case from your requirements document is fine. So copy and paste that in. You don't have to draw a new one. Otherwise, unless anybody had any questions, we can go ahead and split up in groups and get started on the next thing. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and split up and do the groups if you don't mind waiting for just a moment. So Craig. And I guess Corey's not here this evening. And everybody else. All right, y'all should have the buttons for the rooms, and I will be in there in just a moment to get caught up. Oh, I guess I could stop the recording then.